Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I am USA Today bestselling author and a high school English teacher, but I am getting to take a break from lesson planning and all of that to talk to Danica Nava today about her debut rom-com, The Truth According to Ember. Danica, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Check everyone. My name's Danica Nava, and I am an enrolled citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I live in Southern California with my small family.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time. Normally on the show, we're either talking to authors who are from the Four Corners or writing about the Four Corners. And you and your book don't quite fit that, but I found your book at our local bookstore and I had a lot of fun reading it. And I figured, you know what, that was close enough. I wanted to chat with you about your book. So thank you.
Well, thank you. My father-in-law lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so we make it out there.
Oh,
pretty
awesome.
often.
Well, good. So you're familiar with the area and the culture and the people here, which is kind of what drew me to picking up your book at Quill and Quest. I was like, ooh, something new in there. They have a section for Indigenous writers, and I'm always scoping that out to find new things, just so we have a good variety of voices, because sometimes that's a little hard to do at times. I think publishing is opening up to more voices, but obviously not quite as equal as it could be. But I think we're moving in a good track, and so it was nice to see a new book. And I love rom-coms, so I picked yours up, and I really enjoyed reading it. So before I go off on too many rabbit trails, tell our listeners a little bit about The Truth According to Ember.
Yeah, I call The Truth According to Ember my Indigenous Bridget Jones, or to the messy millennial, the young single woman who's just trying to figure out life, and so many mistakes happen as it does. But she doesn't let that keep her down. She keeps trying, she keeps going, and she does find love. So Ember is Chickasaw like myself, and she is working a dead-end job at a bowling alley, and she dreams of being an accountant. And she's been saving up money for a program at her community college, but her brother gets in trouble with the law, and he missed his bail hearing, and so she lost her money. And she's resentful about it, and her brother's in jail, and finally she's had enough, and she decides to lie on the application about her ethnicity, and also embellish and market her experience in a way that makes it sound like she is qualified to be an accountant at a tech startup in downtown Oklahoma City. And there she meets Danica, who is the IT guy, who is visibly Indigenous. He's got long braids, he's Cherokee, and so she has her white presenting features, and you can see how both are treated in the workplace. And it was fun to explore, fun to make these two characters kiss, because at the end of the day, I write romance because I want these two people I made up to be together.
I love that. I write in a whole bunch of different genres, but there's always this underlying romantic element because I just can't help it. I just want to see people have these happy relationships at the end of all the craziness and whatever other complications and conflict I throw at them. So I totally get that.
Yes.
Now, with this one, you really touch on a lot of interesting themes that are very relevant to today. And we'll try to get as many of them as we can pack into our 30 minutes. But what I wanted to start with is Ember's position where she's had some setbacks. She has a plan, but it's not quite working. And she's struggling to figure out, what do I do next? Because nothing's working when she does things like, the way she's supposed to. And I think this really speaks to a lot of young people right now. Like my kids are in college. They're kind of getting ready to start entering the workforce and figuring out what they're going to do. And like with everything going on in the world today, like that's really kind of a scary time of life because you just don't know what's out there and what's going to work. And you see Ember in that position where she's just like, nothing's working out the way that she wants to. And so as you mentioned, she kind of makes a few decisions where she's like, well, maybe this will help. And we see as we read the book where that helps and maybe where it doesn't. But I wanted to ask you about just kind of that point of time in life and everything going on in the world today. Speaking to those readers who are kind of in that similar position, like what led you to those circumstances to plop Ember down in the middle of?
Well, The Truth According to Ember is such a personal story to me. I drew on all of my experiences trying to enter the workforce. After I got my degree, in between degrees, I got a paralegal certificate while I continued doing a night school program to finish my undergrad. I didn't have this like cookie cutter perfect upbringing and then like from high school went straight to college with some scholarship or whatever. I didn't even think college was in the cards for me. My mom and it was just community college maybe, but that's just not what we do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to fight against those expectations of like not asking for more. And I feel like we as a society have been fed this lie, this capitalist lie, and we see it perpetuated on social media every day with influencers. If you have the job title, if you have the new car, the purse, the nails, the whatever outfit, designer bag, then you have made it. Then people will want to be you. You will be happy. But that is a moving target because if you're obtaining things and external things that mind you, you're never going to be happy because it's going to be the next new shiny thing. And with Ember and like myself, you know, I was working the same job that I had gotten when I was 17 in high school. I was working for Hollister, the Abercrombie company. And I did not know that you could ask for raises. I did not know you could negotiate pay. So I was working there for almost 4 years. And the only pay increase I got was when the minimum wage legally changed. But then I was talking to a woman I was working with. She's like, no, I get paid this. I can't believe you. No, you've been here for years. You didn't ask. And I didn't know you could ask for that. I thought, well, if you work hard enough, you're rewarded with that because we kind of been taught, especially in school, like if you keep working hard, you're going to get that A. You can get the extra credit, whatever. But that's not the real world. That's not real life. And having to learn that, especially because my mom didn't even know that you could ask for more. I had to tell her that. And I think when you're raised in a situation where broken home, in poverty, working a bunch of minimal wage jobs, it's tough. And sometimes we don't know how to ask for help. Sometimes we don't know that we're worth more and that we can get more. And it's scary, you know, leaving something that's sure, like, okay, the minimum wage, whatever, but leaving something that like it could be better, it could be more if I do the work and I get the job or, you know, the degree. What was really frustrating for me was, you know, I got the degree, I got this job as an executive assistant to this very wealthy man, and I'm doing these tasks, and I was like, wait a minute, I could have done all this with my paralegal certificate, but you wouldn't have paid me anything. But because of this degree, I had a lot of feelings and a lot of resentments, and I worked through them with Ember in the book. And I wrote it when I was in business school. So I went back to school, doing night school, working full time with a newborn, and I was going to USC to get my MBA. And being around a lot of mediocre men, frankly, in class who, you know, they had job titles higher than mine, are doing work and being on group projects. And, you know, group projects are the worst in school. And there's always going to be someone who's doing more work and someone who's doing absolutely nothing. And that was just the majority of like my classmates, you know, I was experiencing, and I just was growing more and more resentful. And I got to play with those feelings, and Ember was like my little avatar. And then I got to kind of give her that happy ending. You know, I could control the variables so that she had this neat ending at the end with the epilogue.
I love that. I think there's so much we draw from as writers to what we've experienced, and we work through a lot of emotions and thoughts and just frustrating and happy stuff too. We do throw in the happy stuff too. It's not all our frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what you brought up about seeing kind of that there are other options and that there's more out there, and that we don't always know that it's okay to ask for that. And that's something that I see a lot with my students. I teach 9th grade, so I'm working with, you know, the brand newbies coming into high school, and they're coming out of this kind of middle school system that is not very realistic in my opinion. And like you talked to them at the beginning, you know, what do you guys want to do and what are your plans? And how many of you want to go to college or trade school? And it surprises me every year, the number that don't raise their hand. And it's like, well, how come? What do you want to do? And it's kind of, you know, that generational expectation of, well, this is the most we can have. This is the best we can do. My parents live this kind of life, so that's what kind of life I'm going to live. And like, you can hear someone say, like, no, there's lots of programs to help you pay for college. But like, if you've never seen anyone else in your life do that, it doesn't seem attainable. And that is such
No.
a hard thing to overcome and a cycle to break. And like, we don't have good things in place for that a lot of the times. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, the Cal grants here in California, like, never applied for colleges, and my mom refused to even help. Like, just the idea of talking about finances and taxes, she just was not open about that, and so I got no help there. And, it depressed me, honestly. My senior year of high school, I had a deep depression because I worked so hard to get really good grades, expecting I'd go to college, actually. And I starred in a lot of plays, and I thought I would get to major in theater and writing, and hearing from my grandma, you can't get a job with that. Why would you even do that? And we don't go to college, and you're not going to get help. And then I didn't have consistent access to the internet at home. So how was I supposed to apply at home on what? A shared computer that didn't go online? I had no idea. And then the shame. There was no one at school who was a teacher that I felt comfortable enough to talk to them about, to ask for help. And there's a lot of students, so it's not like they're going out of their way talking to each individual student about it. So there was just a lot of factors there. And also, I loved to read all my life. I loved Meg Cabot. She changed my life. I love her stories. And then, as I'm reading Sophie Kinsella and Sally Thorne and all the greats, but there's so many that I could never see myself in, because the quote rom-com poor is wealthy compared to real poor that I experience, where they inherit like a Victorian manor, but with a cupcake business, and the rival is another baker or something, and it's like, oh, how I'm so broke, and then they're like, still going out to dinner and things like that. And I'm like, girl, get another job. Like, if you're that broke, like, what are you talking about? And I find that so unrelatable. And what's so interesting, though, is that the booksellers, the publishers, and the people marketing those books, those are, quote, the most accessible, the most, anybody can read these, everyone can relate to these. And it's like, well-off white women can, and middle class, upper classes. And so, I don't know, it's my own little act of revolution that I write grounded rom-coms. I want people who could be my sister, who could be my best friend, who could be my cousin, that we all are worthy of love. Love transcends class barriers. It transcends gender, race. It is the purest form of magic that we will ever experience in life. And we all are deserving of it, especially in media, especially Indigenous people, where we're never shown. And romance is $1 billion industry. And for 3 decades, the bodice strippers with the savage warrior on it, that's the only Native American representation we had in romance. 3 decades, from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The Truth According to Ember was the first, quote, traditionally published Native American rom-com written by me, an Indigenous woman, starring Indigenous characters. And I did a lot of press last year, and it was a lot of like, do you feel pressure? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. Because I don't ever want to give some executive at $1 billion corporation an excuse, for my, quote, sales or whatever performance. It's not transparent to me what a successful book is. And then I don't want them ever saying, like, people don't want Native books, Native romance, so we don't need another one. That is a lot of pressure, intended or not. And it's lonely out here. I want more. We deserve more. I can't be the end all be all. There's so many writers with different perspectives.
Absolutely. Well, and I living in New Mexico, we have a rich writing community in the state and writing history. But one of the things that when I started teaching public school and I'm like looking through our curriculum, and I'm like, okay, we have about a third Native students, a third Hispanic, a third white, with a few other races and ethnicities mixed in. And so I went to our curriculum and it's like, okay, I want to have a range of representative texts and authors that match my students. And I was blown away at how few resources were available. I was just like, really? Like, we don't have any Native authors in our curriculum library, like, at all. So it's become kind of like this personal mission for me, for like my classroom library of just books that I collect and I purchase for my library, of trying to find a wider range of topics and authors. And it is really hard still to find Indigenous writers, particularly for like the high school level. I think we're expanding a little bit more, but yeah, I have a really hard time finding books that I feel like a lot of my students can see themselves in. And I know that that makes a difference. And we do a lot of creative writing where they can create those stories. Because at this point, I'm like, well, that's how you're going to see yourself in it, is if you create it. And hopefully, that influences some of them to, to see, like you're saying, to see themselves in some of these situations and to realize like there's more out there and there's options and they can do all kinds of things. It's not just this one group of people that they see in media who get to have and do all the things. There's so much more. And I love that we're seeing more books like yours where there's a variety of characters that we're seeing in normal everyday situations. It's not like, oh, this is this one shiny object that is going to highlight Indigenous characters. They're normal people and they're having these experiences that, yes, everybody can relate to, kind of those growing pains of being a young person trying to enter the grown-up world and things not going well. But you bring in a lot of other things that really specifically speak to Ember's situation. And as I was reading, it was like, these are things that like a lot of my students have faced as well. And they don't always know how to talk about it because those words and those conversations aren't always there and not always welcome, unfortunately, in certain situations to talk about how people are treated differently within systems because of who they are. And I liked that you brought those in a very realistic and natural way. It wasn't like, okay, and now we're going to discuss this topic about racism. No. So tell me about incorporating some of the messages that you wanted to share into the story without, sometimes you feel like you want to get on your soapbox and be like, come on, people, like quit being dumb or, whatever. But you really worked it in really well.
Well, thank you. I didn't really set out like, okay, I'm writing this and these are the major topics I want to address. I always wanted to write a Native rom-com. I had another one I was drafting, and then my father passed away, and there's that manuscript I don't think I'll ever return to. So there were a couple years where I was really this creative drought, where I was like, the story that I thought was going to be my Native rom-com, this great idea, and that manuscript is gone from forever. What is it going to be? And I knew I wanted a girl in an office who's Native, an accountant, and then the Native IT guy. And it just kind of evolved as I was writing things. It naturally happened where she's angry about this check your ethnicity box, and that kind of her thought process is in first person point of view. That came out of me. And then the bar scene with these guys and Donna with the braids, that just, those things happen. And I had an early reader and she was just like, that would never happen. And I was like, girl, this happens and worse. I didn't want to sensationalize anything. So I don't know. I wish I could say I was like this big mastermind plotter and I knew exactly the themes I wanted to touch. I knew community was the big one, that she would return to her community to get help. It wasn't going to be some deus ex machina and everything magically happens and everything's perfect. And, this story was just so grounded in reality that I wanted, how would a real Ember overcome this? And the Chickasaw Nation and the grants and how I was able to go to school is how I solved it.
I love that. I think, everybody has their own writing process, but I think when those ideas and messages that are communicated develop naturally as part of the story, they come across so much better and so much more authentically than when we sometimes have an idea of like, I'm going to write about this so people learn, this, that, or the other. I think sometimes when you approach a project with something in mind, it gets harder to blend it in seamlessly because it's so present in our minds and those are important ideas that we want to share, but it can overtake it. And I didn't feel like that at all reading your book. I loved how much everything blended together. And I really felt for Ember in a lot of those situations. And living here in the Four Corners, it's such a unique area where we have this mix of culture and long-standing culture with long histories of conflict. It may seem like it's all in the past, but it's not. and we still encounter
It's
it
not
every
that
day.
much of a distant past.
Yeah.
Like in the grand scheme of like millennia, you're like, wow, that was like actually not that long ago. What's going on here? No, and then with the missing and murdered and Indigenous women epidemic, it's awful. And I don't ever want to gatekeep characters like Indigenous people. I feel like as writers, our books should reflect the world that we really live in, especially if we're writing contemporary. And especially if you're writing small town or cowboy or whatever, like we're here, we exist. And I think moving past stereotypes of like the mystical whatever, or the warrior, the stoicism, and just having us be regular people. But it's not like you just write a white character and then you shade them in. You're like, okay, well, they're indigenous. But they go about life as a white person, because that's not true. There's so much nuance. And, a microaggression, to a white person, they wouldn't even clock it. But to an indigenous person, that is a big deal. Ember's car breaking down on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, that is a big deal. Someone might think that's totally fine and would be fine, but that's a moment of panic for Ember, because somebody could just come and snatch her and she'll never be heard of from again. No one will even try to find her.
I like that you point that out, because I think that it's an interesting topic. And I was at a writing conference over the summer where that came up, and it remained polite, but it got a little bit heated as people were talking about who has the right to write what type of characters, and kind of how you balance that. Are there gatekeepers? What does that mean to write outside of your experience? And overall, like, it was a really good discussion, and people brought up some great things that they'd been thinking. But it is a difficult subject, I guess, to like say that there are right and wrong answers. I think a lot of it, like you said, is not relying on stereotypes, not kind of giving like the token characters. Like, okay, yes, I
Yeah.
have a diverse cast, but they all live and experience life exactly the same way. And it's like, well, how does that help, really? you know? And that's something that I think is a challenge in today's publishing, where a lot of agents and publishers are looking for inclusive, diverse stories. But if they're not actually addressing those differences in experience, then it's not really hitting the mark. And I think readers pick up on that and feel that. And I wish I could tell you the name of the book. It was a conversation I had with a coworker, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And she was talking about a friend of hers who was African American, and she read a book. I can't even remember what it was about. And the character was also African American. And the author described how her cheeks heated rather than saying she blushed. She's like, no, her cheeks heated. They felt warm when she was blushing because she was a darker skin tone, where that wasn't visually obvious that she was blushing. And just that little tiny description really made her friend like feel seen. Like, yeah, that is what I experience. I don't, turn beet red because that doesn't show on my skin. And so like something even that small in the description like really made a difference to her as a reader. And it's not just, the author didn't just gloss over like what that felt like in the moment for that character. She really portrayed it in a way that spoke to readers who had that same experience. And I think that takes that extra consciousness to do that, particularly if you're writing outside of your own experience, to learn about that, to talk to people, to do the due diligence and research if you're going to write outside your character or outside of your experience. But I think it really shone. I always get those mixed up, but in yours, that, you were writing from a place of authenticity that, like me as a reader, my experience anyway, was really feeling the compassion for the characters, the connected emotions to what was going on, to really like let me connect too, even though some of Ember's experiences were different from mine, to really be able to feel it with her and experience those things with her. And that really stood out to me, and I really appreciated that in your writing.
Well, thank you. And I think it comes down to empathy too. Like, I try not to assume everyone has malintent. I think ignorance, but there's room for grace. There's room for people to grow. There's room for people to learn and do better. And, I try to put that out into the world. But I hope I wrote it that people outside of the Indigenous lived experience can also relate. The Ember's just like any other girl, any other single girl trying to fall in love and get a job and just make it work, you know? That's why I was obsessed with Bridget Jones's Diary as a young girl. I probably watched it too young. I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 when my mom showed it to us on VHS. And that soundtrack still slaps. That's probably where I get my quirky humor from, and like cringe humor. I love to make people squirm and cringe and get secondhand embarrassment. Like when she gets that fly in her tooth in the movie.
I love that. There is a lot more that we could talk about, but we are getting close to time to wrap up. And I know that you do have a new book coming out, so I wanted to save a few minutes for you to shout out about that and let people know kind of what it is and what they should look out for and when it will be coming up. So tell us a little bit about your future plans.
Yeah, so Love is a War Song actually came out July 22nd, and it's been a USA Today bestseller for 2 weeks in a row since it debuted. Hopefully it stays there. We'll see. August 6th had a bunch of heavy hitters come out. But yeah, it's a cowboy western rom-com, but they're Indigenous characters again. So you get this small town set in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, on a ranch, a horse ranch, and it stars Avery Fox, who is she's Muskogee, she's descended. She's grown up in Los Angeles as a child actress turned pop star, and now she's on the cusp of stardom with her hit single, I Need a Warrior Tonight. But then she's canceled because she's put on the cover of Rolling Stone wearing a bedazzled feather war bonnet and not much else. And it sparks public outcry and backlash, and she's threatened, and her label wants to drop her. So her mother sends her to Red Fox Ranch. And Avery's never known about her family. Her mother's estranged, and she never talked about it. So she grew up disconnected from the Muskogee culture. So she goes back to the res, learns about this grandma and her whole family. And there is Lucas Iron Eyes, and he is a ranch hand who's been working there for over a decade. And he hates Avery, her music, and everything she stands for, and doesn't want her there. But, you know, sparks fly. They happen to be gorgeous people who can't be apart because I throw them together a bunch.
I love that forced proximity trope. I think it's a lot of fun to see what happens with people when they just like, no, you can't leave. You have to be here and you have to figure it out and find a way through.
Yeah.
It's fun.
This is my horse book that the horse movies that I loved growing up was like Flicka. There was a show called Wildfire, Hannah Montana the movie. And I wanted to see a Native girl be the star and fall in love. And, you know, what is it to reconnect? What's the right way? Who can or cannot say they're Native? You know, I dive into these topics and I hope it's nuanced and layered enough. There's not one right answer, one, you know, size fits all. But it was so much fun to write. I think it's funnier than ever. Grown. Some of the funniest things I've written are in that book. And so that's out now. And then my next book with Berkeley is going to be out next fall.
Well, I will keep an eye out for it at our local bookstore as soon as I get caught up on some of my reading and can add more to my giant book list. But yeah, where can people find you online if they want to follow you, stay up to date, and just not miss anything?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active for Threads. And the handle's at my name, Danica _Nava, DANICA_NAVA. It's not a curated feed. There's a photo of me with Fabio on there. It's a fun time.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Danica, for taking the time to chat with me. And I hope people take a minute. We'll put your links in the show notes for people who want to follow and stay up to date on what you're doing. But thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you for having me.